And we'll get back into what we were discussing last week. And we've been discussing topics from the book. So you want to talk about race by Ijeoma Oluo, and I hope I'm saying her name close to correctly. And it's been such a present topic for us right now as a nation. And I'm sure that there are some other nations in the world that have difficulty with this, but we seem to be uniquely challenged by race, and it is something that we inherited. It was part of our history as a nation, and boy, the challenge continues. The pushback continues. So when last we left off, there is a chapter in the book that's about the N-word. And I think that the actual title of that chapter in the book is "Why Can't I Say the N-Word?" And what she kind of refers to is the fact that it seems okay for Black people to say the N-word, but it's not okay for white people to say the N-word. And there's some questioning about that. And, well, why and how did that come about? So, again, for those of you that can't see the screen, I'm going to read this slide, and the quote from her book says, "From the 1700s on, the word nigger was used almost exclusively to express hatred. Nigger was a word shouted at Black men, women, and children by slave masters as they lashed their backs with whips. Nigger was a word hollered by white men in pickup trucks as they chased down Black kids." Instead of saying it, I don't even like saying it. "The N-word was a word repeated by men in white hoods as they got ready to burn a cross on the lawn of a Black family. The N-word was a word spat at hanged Black bodies. It's a very powerful word with a very painful history." And then what I have for the picture, it's actually a picture of a newspaper clipping. And handwritten on the clipping is the date of the paper it was from. And that date is November 5th, 1970. And what the article is about, the headline of the article says, "Nigger Beating Club Formed at Pioneer." And then the first sentence is, "A Black student from Pioneer High School charged last night there's an underground group of white pupils at Pioneer named the NBC Club." And we know what that stood for. Okay, so just to make, like, a lot of us have tried to put racial strife in the past, right? Like, okay, yeah, we did the civil rights movement. We got that done. 1970 was 4 years before I entered high school, or at least before I became a freshman. Back in the day, I was a freshman at the junior high school, but that's my lifetime. That's my lifetime. And it just, we try to sweep this stuff under the rug, which is, what is a lot of white people are attempting to do right now. They're attempting to shove white culpability under a rug where they want to keep it. But, this particular word is a word that there was never a positive connotation to it, It's like, okay, I'm a hillbilly, right? I'm from West Virginia, right? It's not the nicest thing to call somebody. Almost nobody ever says hillbilly as a compliment. But, people love the Beverly Hillbillies, right? It was not a bad word. And living in Florida where there are a lot of crackers, right? Some people want to try to get their back up about the word cracker, about being called a cracker. Well, it's just not the same thing. It's not. And, you know, what the word cracker comes from is from whip cracker. And it really has to do with the guys that used to herd cattle down to Florida for the winter for grazing. It's an old word, but it's, boy, is it ever not the same thing. And in her explanation of this, one of the things that she said that really stuck with me, and again, I'll read this for those of you that can't see, but she says, as long as we've had the spoken word, language has been one of the first tools deployed in efforts to oppress others. Words are how we process the world, how we form our societies, how we codify our morals. In order to make injustice and oppression palatable in a world with words that say such things are unacceptable, we must come up with new words to distance ourselves from the realities of the harm we are perpetrating on others. This is how Black people, human beings, become niggers. All oppression in race, class, gender, ability, religion, it all began with words. And then the image just says, what you say has a big impact. Choose your words wisely. And we see that, you know, again, today in a lot of the political discourse. Not to be partisan or anything, but, you know, we see the word nasty used a lot, especially in describing women. And that is done very, you know, very specifically and in this context, right? It is a way of using language to try to get a specific effect. And, you know, all of the descriptives that get thrown at people, whether it's, you know, Sleepy Joe Biden or nasty whoever she is, Pocahontas. Wow. So one of the things that Ijeoma talked about is, so why would Black people want to use the N-word? And essentially her point was that if you can think of that word as a weapon, and that's exactly what it was, okay? For literally hundreds of years, this weapon has been used against this group of people. So it represents power that is being used against them, a weapon that's being used against them. And what it's time for them to be able to do is to pick that weapon up themselves and to reclaim the power of that weapon. And by them doing that, it can then dissolve the power against them, at least in some aspects. But, you know, the truth of the matter is, until we can completely remove the power, and especially the difference in power, by people who use it as a pejorative and people who are attempting to reclaim its power, we're going to have a problem. This one's interesting, and you know, Laura, feel free to jump in anytime you want. And I know you can't see the title of the slide, but it's, what is cultural appropriation? And Laura has gotten on me from time to time for culturally appropriating, and I got to admit, I'm guilty. I am. You know, I grew up in a time when it seemed, you know, perfectly acceptable for some of us to dress up as cowboys and some of us to dress up as Indians, for example, right? So for the first few pages of the chapter on this, Ijeoma talks about a time when she was going on a plane flight, and she's in the airport and she's really hungry, and she's, wanting something besides a plastic covered bagel. So she sees this sign for a thing called the Africa Lounge. And she's like, oh my God, there's African food. Like I can go get some good, like some really good, nutritious, delicious food, that reminds me of how I grew up and the people I grew up with, and, smells and tastes of home and stuff, right? Well, she goes into this airline place and finds out the Africa Lounge does not have a lick of African food. It's just got a bunch of pseudo African junk decorating it, right? And so just out of curiosity, I Googled it and I actually pulled up, you guys can't see this, but there's an image from the airport's webpage of the Africa Lounge, and it looks pretty tacky. And guess who the two people are in the picture? They're a lovely young white couple having Bloody Marys at the bar, right? They're like the least Africa Lounge looking people on the planet. And here's the actual blurb from the website. Exotically decorated with an African motif, this lounge is furnished with leopard prints, hand-painted murals, and a custom-crafted elephant head. The lounge also has surround sound music and 4 televisions for viewing sports and the latest news. Appetizers include super nachos, chicken wings, and hummus and pita. The St. Louis-style ribs is just one of the entrees, and we feature a wide range of sandwiches. Dessert choices include cheesecake. Not an African dish in sight, nothing. And she talks about how disappointed she was, and just, having to eat crap again at the airport. But also, what a lost opportunity that was, because it's an international airport. And there actually is a large African community in the Seattle-Tacoma area, which is where she's from. And she thought, what a great thing it would be to be able to showcase.
Hey, love, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I can't hear you through the speaker anymore.
You can't hear me? Huh.
I can still hear you. I'm not, maybe on Laura's end.
Yeah, same here. I can hear you.
Okay.
I can still hear you.
Okay. All right, honey. Well, I guess your phone's just, you come in here and sit with me. So yeah.
I can hear you too.
Okay. Yeah, it looked like, Zoom, how your picture has the little highlight around it when your mic is active. It seems to be working. So anyway, it seemed to her like it was, not only is it just a really horrifyingly bad example of cultural appropriation, but it was also a lost opportunity to actually make a demonstration of diversity. So what is cultural appropriation? And here is, she has a short definition of it, but I liked this better. She says, at its core, cultural appropriation is about ownership of one's culture, and since culture is defined both collectively and individually, the definition and sentiment about cultural appropriation changes with one's identification and sentiment about aspects of their culture. And she says, and she even admits that's a complicated definition, but it's true, and it's important to note that just because one member of a culture doesn't feel that a certain thing crosses a line into cultural appropriation doesn't mean that another member of that culture might not feel that, they might say, hey, that's out of bounds. That's going too far. I really don't appreciate that. And that can be totally valid, right? So, some people from where I grew up would be they might get their back up a little bit about people blacking out their teeth and wearing straw hats and overalls and, you know, being hillbillies, right? Some of us would not. It just, you know, and then, you know, so obviously there are going to be other people who are more sensitive about one thing or another. And the thing is we need to be sensitive to everyone, right? We can't demand that people say, "Oh, well, no, you're, you know, your brother even, right? Over here says that that's okay, so it's okay. You just have to, you know, get over it." No, that's not the way that really works. And then, if we want to dig into why is cultural appropriation a problem, other than just being kind of insensitive and insulting and making a stereotype out of people, okay? I thought this was really, really very good at revealing it. It says the problem of cultural appropriation is not in the desire to participate in aspects of a different culture that you admire, right? And a lot of us want to do that, you know? I mean, it's like when you go travel someplace, you know, do you want to eat at McDonald's or do you want to go to a local restaurant and eat what the locals eat, right? I want to taste the tastes and smell the smells and see the sights of something different. That's why I go there. Sure, that's nothing wrong with that. The problem of cultural appropriation is primarily linked to the power imbalance between the culture doing the appropriating and the culture being appropriated. That power imbalance allows the culture being appropriated to be distorted and redefined by the dominant culture and siphons any material or financial benefit of that piece of culture away to the dominant culture, while marginalized cultures are still persecuted for living in that culture. Without that cultural power imbalance, cultural appropriation becomes much less harmful. So if we think about colonization, right? Like we think about all of the treasures that were looted out of Egypt, for example, right? And taken back to places like Great Britain, you know, or other European countries. Well, the people in Europe were not attempting to do that to hold up those people currently living in Egypt. And any real benefit that could have come from those artifacts was ripped out of the hands of the people in Egypt and given to the people in Europe. And that's just a tiny example, right? So kind of then changing course and going from, you know, the greater, the larger culture and getting down into literally personal space. She talks, she has one chapter where she talks about, why can't I touch your hair? Which, why would you want to touch somebody's hair anyway? But, and as for those of you that can't see the slide, I sort of have a subtitle to the title, why can't I touch your hair? Obviously, this is less prevalent in the middle of a pandemic, but we still need to talk about it, okay? So apparently that's the thing. Apparently, for some reason, white people like to ask black people, can I touch your hair? Or worse, they just touch it. They just reach out their hands and touch it because it's like, ooh, that hair's different from my hair. I want to touch it. So I do. Okay, so here's some reasons why people might object to that, just in case you ever had the urge, all right? And she lays these out pretty well. Touching anybody anywhere without their permission or a damn good reason is just not okay. And that is exactly the way she wrote it, okay? And she's right. Bodily autonomy, be turned off, right? Number two, it's weird, because it is. Number three, hands are dirty, right? I mean, it's one thing we've learned during this pandemic. It's like, wash your hands, sanitize your hands. Those things are filthy. Number four, and this is, okay, this is maybe more of a girl thing, but she wrote, curls are precious. Apparently, it's kind of hard to get your hair to curl just the way you want it. And, if I think back to my days, during the 70s with a blow dryer, okay, I'm there with you. I got you. Curls are precious. Don't mess with the hair, right? And this is really the bottom line here, at least for me, when I read it. It is a continuation of the lack of respect for the basic humanity and bodily autonomy of Black Americans that is endemic throughout white supremacy. We could look back into the Bible and see, especially the patriarchal culture there, and slavery was rampant. Women and children were property. They weren't real people. The heir to the family, right? Because that's part of the patriarchal line, of course, is an important person, even if it's a kid. But everybody else is they're expendable. Bottom line. And sadly, a lot of people have had this attitude about other people's bodies throughout history. You look at how long ago slavery was in America, it's not that long. And how long it lasted. I mean, for most of the time that white people have been on the North American continent, we had slavery. Even now, when we talk about the lack of respect for basic humanity and bodily autonomy, one of the things that I don't talk about much about my military service was the last year I was on active duty, I was a CENTCOM certified collateral damage analyst. We don't have any problem destroying innocent people's bodies if it maintains the power order the way that we want it to. And that is an inevitable result of the same attitude towards humans that causes people to just say, I can touch your hair if I want to. We really have to work on our respect for all people, not just people who have power, not just people who have something that we want, not just people that we perceive to be above us in some shape or fashion, whether it's economically, socially, whatever. So for those members of the Black community, this is what she said, this is kind of like this is why this upsets us, right? She says, but mostly we have just wanted to go about our day without the reminder that our bodies and our hair are found brutish and ugly or fascinating and exotic. We still live in a country where our hair is seen as wild, as unattractive, as unprofessional, as ghetto. We still live in a country where our hair can cost us jobs, even our place in the military. We still live in a country where our hair determines how professional we seem, how respectable we seem, even how intelligent we seem. Our hair is used to help determine our place in a white supremacist society. And I included a little cartoon. It's actually fairly old because it kind of shows Barack Obama as the president, because it goes, back to then. But it's a sergeant talking to a black female, telling her she's violated Army Regulation 670-1, which is the uniform regulations, about, the problem with her hair. And then it's like 3 times in a row, she tries her hair different ways. And every time he's telling her she's violated AR 670-1. Finally, you see a picture of her in her bathroom with a box of hair dye. And then she shows back up with her hair dyed completely blonde and just hanging down the back. And he's got his thumb up and says approved. So that's why we can't touch their hair, right? Seems pretty simple. Now, boy, here's one that, we could probably spend all day talking about. What are microaggressions? And I had to put in, as if anybody living in the Deep South doesn't know, right? And I think there is absolutely a connection between the passive aggressive behavior that we see in Southern culture and the fact that microaggressions are used as a racist weapon. I don't think there is any doubt about there being a connection between those two things. So when we say, what are microaggressions? So again, for those of you that don't have that are on your phones, microaggressions are small, hence the micro, and can be easily explained away. Oh, that was just a little, I didn't really mean anything by that. It was just, I was just making conversation. Microaggressions are cumulative, right? When somebody keeps, it's like death by 1,000 cuts, like 1,000 paper cuts, right? One paper cut, not a big deal. Somebody cuts you 1,000 times with a piece of paper, that's gonna hurt. Microaggressions are perpetrated by many different people. And here's the thing that we want to be conscious of. Those of us who don't want to hurt others, many people do not consciously know that they are perpetrating a microaggression against someone. We have no idea. I didn't know that would be, if you take that way. And so I have a picture here, and this is, there are several pictures you can find on the internet of black people holding up like a whiteboard, and on it is written something that somebody has said to them, right? So this guy is holding up this whiteboard, and on it says, "You're not like the other black people I know. You speak so well." And in the mind of that white person, they just complimented him. But that's a microaggression, right? So one of the big pieces to take away from this, at least I thought, is this quote. She says, microaggressions are a serious problem beyond the emotional and physical effects they have on the person they're perpetrated against. They have much broader social implications. They normalize racism. They normalize racism. And that is why our administration is currently pushing back against educating white people that what we're doing isn't, that we need to get woke up, because we have a systemically racist society. So I have a graphic over here, and it shows a triangle. And the three legs of the triangle are labeled microaggressions, stereotypes, and implicit bias. And if Laura were able to be on here still, she could talk to us about implicit bias all afternoon because, you know, as somebody that works in diversity and inclusion, that's one of the big things that their work is designed to help people uncover, is to help people realize, oh, wow, I had this bias and I didn't even know I had it, right? So here's what happens. We stereotype people. And it says on here, what a stereotype is judgments or characteristics attributed to specific groups of people, races, genders, age groups, etc., that may or may not be true for any one specific individual within that group. Well, we stereotype people. We say, okay, that guy's from inside that box, right? Well, then that makes it okay for us to perpetrate these microaggressions. And what are microaggressions? They are, according to this, subtle verbal or nonverbal insults, indignities, or denigrating messages directed toward an individual due to their marginalized identity. Often and this is a piece of it, often committed by well-intentioned people who are unaware of the hidden message conveyed or the impact of their statements. That person saying to that guy, "Hey, you don't talk like black people. You talk real good." You know, they think they're giving them an insult or a compliment. I'm sorry, right? So, and a lot of where this comes from is the implicit bias that gets built up by that stereotype. An implicit bias is subconscious attitudes, perceptions, and stereotypes that influence our understanding, actions, and behavior when interacting with various identities. So these three things, they support each other. They keep that triangle in one piece: stereotypes, microaggressions, implicit bias. So what are we going to do about that? Well, one of the things we have to realize, and this is a quote for those of you that can't see it: the privilege you enjoy in not having to constantly suffer these indignities requires that you at least take responsibility for how your actions may be adding to them and the pain that causes. And then I have a picture of two women, one of them's white and one of them's black, and there's a caption that says, "Recognize how we each contribute to the problem." I have to recognize how I, as a white, male, straight, cisgender boomer who grew up, in a simple little place back in the 60s and 70s, I have to realize I have blind spots and be willing to look for them. And if somebody says, "Oh, hey, you can't do that. That ain't right," instead of arguing with them, I need to really look at that and not only not do that, but try to find out where it comes from and see if I can't just learn to do better instead of not doing any better, but at least being able to admit I'm wrong. See, you see the difference? We want to get better, do better. We don't want to hurt people to begin with. I mean, we say they'll know we are Christians by our love, right? Jesus may have been, one of the more Socratic people. Like that the whole idea of compassion is, well, first of all, we're going to do no harm, right? Let's not harm others. And how we treat each other is a big piece of it. So, again, kind of going back to how different things are, right? We talked last week about police brutality, and it's important to remember that it's basically two different worlds in the same place. As she says, when talking about police brutality, it's important to remember that the police force can be trustworthy public servants to one community and oppressors to another community, just as we can live in a country that promotes prosperity for some and poverty for others, and it can be the same police force in the same country without making any of these realities invalid. And it's very much the same wherever it is. It's the economy, it's the police, it's the airport. It is the experience of our lives. I mean, and I know I've been talking about this in a racial context because that's the way she presents it in this book. But those of you who are women know what it's like to be a woman in a patriarchal society. Those of you who are gay know what it's like to be gay in a straight society. There are a lot of different ways that we can do better. And there are a lot of different ways that we can all treat each other the way that we would want to be treated. And that ultimately is maybe the most important teaching. And it's not just from Christianity, it's from all of the axial religions. In one way or another, they say, treat other people the way you want to be treated.